Hi, and welcome to another narration presented by yours truly, Cryptids Roost. Please be so kind as to throat punch the like button and smack the ass of the subscription button as well. And remember to tap the notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. Oh, and don't forget to share the video far and wide. This will all help with the YouTube algorithm and will help promote the channel more. If you're going to leave a dislike, please leave a comment as to why. That way I can review what you didn't like about the video and I can possibly make changes in further videos. Thank you. If you enjoyed listening to the following story, be sure to pop over to your Reddit profile and drop them a line, or even give them a glowing review. I'm sure they would appreciate it. The link to their Reddit profile will be below. So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not. I'm a vampire and I investigate the supernatural, part 2. They have serial killers too. This fantastic story is written by HeadOfSpectre, a wonderful author over on Reddit's NoSleep subreddit. One thing I've learned throughout my long life is that people aren't as different from every other species on Earth as they think they are. What some might call the traits that make us human aren't all that exclusive to us. Rats are capable of emotion. Gibbons form families very much like our own. And elephants mourn their dead just like we do. The emotional complexity of the other creatures on this earth is a fascinating subject, but there is a dark side to it. Dolphins are capable of rape. Polar bears have been known to cannibalize each other, and killing for fun is a common behaviour exhibited by many predators. Hell, if you look through the animal kingdom, I'm confident you'll find them committing just about every single abominable act under the sun. The only thing that really sets humanity apart is that we're a little bit more self-aware. We're not above the depravity, but we try to be. Maybe that counts for something, I really can't say. What fascinates me though are the things that imitate humanity. Those beings who look like us, act like us and talk like us, but aren't strictly speaking human. I'm sure you've heard of fae, for instance. They're all over the spectrum. They're intelligent, mostly, and although a few of the less human-like groups have no interest in pretending, some of them are damn near indistinguishable from anyone you pass on the street. You could drive yourself mad wondering about the nature of humanity, where it begins, or what it is that truly separates us from the animals. Intelligence? Self-awareness? Empathy? Or something else entirely? I myself couldn't even begin to come up with an answer, and that's a shame. You see, I hunt monsters for a living. You wouldn't think it would be difficult to tell the difference between a person and an animal. But when most of the people you deal with aren't technically human, that line can easily blur. It's always those cases that stay with me. Putting down a mindless animal is one thing, but going up against something that's not all that different from you, well, that's a lot more complicated. My name is Robert Marsh, and I'm not exactly human myself. Not anymore. It shouldn't be surprising that I've had quite a bit of experience with the supernatural. Enough so that when it starts threatening regular people, I'm the one they call. The International Fae Relations Bureau's Department of Public Safety didn't normally poke their heads into isolated incidents. Strange bodies turning up every now and again were small potatoes. As grim as it sounds, shit happens. People run into all sorts of nasty creatures from time to time. There's no way to stop it. However, when a pattern comes up, that's something they can't ignore. And when the latest incident involves a whole family of 5 turning up dead, that's when I get a call. Swansons had been a moderately well-off family, living in a pretty house off a country road, well off the beaten path. It was an hour's drive from my modest little apartment, but at least I didn't make it alone. Yellow Rose, A woman with whom I had a complicated relationship with in the past sat beside me. When we first met and dated, she'd been just an ordinary girl, and contrary to what pop culture might have some people believe, romance between ordinary girls and vampires doesn't ever end well. It has been a few months since she'd come back into my life, and circumstances had made it necessary to curse her with the same immortality that I tolerated. It had been a hasty decision, but better than leaving her to die. I didn't turn her for the sake of company. I'm not quite that selfish. If there was a future for us, we weren't quite ready for that discussion. For the time being, I was content to simply help her adjust to her new eternal life, and to that end, she's been helping me with my work. It has been years since I've had a partner, and so far, that arrangement had worked out nicely. I could see the flashing lights of the police sirens cutting through the dark, marking the Swanson house as they drew near, and pulled up the long driveway. I caught the eyes of a couple wearing uniformed officers, and as we pulled up to the house, but they didn't try to stop me. Near the front door, I could see the shadow of a portly man in his 40s. I recognised him even before I saw his face. Detective Rick Davis, an old friend of mine. As Dara and I got out the car, Davis waited for us in the doorway. He took a final drag on his cigarette and watched us as we approached the door before he snuffed it and let us in. "Nice to see you again, Marsh," he said, all business as usual. The inside of the Swanson house looked almost immaculately clean. You could have probably used it as a show home. It was just the three of us in the house. As per standard protocol, the other officers had been removed from the scene prior to our arrival. It was better that they not see too much of us. "Always a pleasure, Detective," I replied. His gaze lingered on Della, a hint of mistrust in his eyes, although he kept his mouth shut about that. "What are you looking at?" I asked, best to keep things on track. David nodded towards the stairway. "Bodies are upstairs in the main bedroom. 4 victims, 2 adults, 2 children," he said. "4 victims?" I asked. "I heard it was a family of 5. "The youngest child, May, is currently missing. We think that maybe they might have fled. We've got some officers searching for her now." "Do you think they ran?" I asked. David just shrugged and turned to lead us up the stairs. "Possibly. I can't imagine how a perp was interested in kidnapping given the mess they left." He led us into the bedroom and stopped outside the door. "See for yourself." I nodded at him before opening the door. I'd seen my fair share of corpses in the past, but seeing a child had never gotten easier. I'd known what I was walking into and grimaced at the sight of the still bodies on the floor. Besides me, Della let out a quiet gasp. "Jesus!" she murmured as I stepped inside. The man who used to be Mr. Swanson was on the bed, naked as the day he was born. His body was as pale as alabaster. His wife lay close to the door, crumpled on the floor, and her 2 children were scattered about close to her. The first thing I noticed was blood, or the lack of it. Mr. Swanson had almost none around him, although I could clearly see several bite marks on his body. Most of them were on his shoulders, and some of them looked as if they'd been healing. Most of them. It didn't take a genius to figure out that the ragged chunk torn out of his throat had been what killed him. His wife and children, on the other hand, hadn't been drained. They'd been bitten, that much was clear, but their bodies each had one single fatal bite to the throat. From the look of it, they hadn't fought much either. I imagined all 3 of them lined up by the bed, quietly waiting for their turn as the killer picked them off methodically. "What did this?" Della asked quietly. "Another vampire?" She stood over the bodies of the wife and the children, careful to avoid stepping in the pool of blood that stained the carpet beneath them. "Vampires aren't the only herbivores out there," I murmured as I leaned over the body of Mr. Swanson. I shifted his head to get a better look at the wound in his neck. The bite looked jagged, as if the flesh had been torn out. I studied the healing bites on his shoulders as well. Those looked to be a few days old. The bites been cleaner and hadn't gotten much treatment.
What else could have done this?
Della asked. My guess? A siren, I said before standing up. I gestured for her to join me by Mr. Swanson's corpse. See the bite marks on his shoulders? Those are a few days old. They were healing. That's usually where most sirens bite. Reduces the chance of killing the prey. If they go for the throat, well... Della looked at the ragged wound in Mrs. Swanson's throat. She got the point. Bite pattern looks consistent too, I noted. Sirens have a mouth like a shark, made to rip and tear. A siren would also explain the positions of the bodies.
How?
Della asked. From the corner of my eye, I saw Davis leaning against the doorframe, listening intently. Well, what do you know about sirens from mythology? I asked.
They sing?
Della asked. She looked at me, then at Davis for confirmation. They hypnotise, Davis said, and they're supposedly so beautiful that they're irresistible to men, like a honey trap, right? More or less, I said. Reality isn't all that far off. Most sirens are female. They tend to target men looking for sex and then feed off them. They're herbivores, just like us, only they've got a natural hypnosis to make the process easier. It doesn't work on everyone, but it might explain why the wife and kids just stood there while our killer picked them off. They probably walked in on dinner.
Why not drain the wife and the kids though?
Della asked. The stomach can only hold so much blood. She'd already drained her husband. That's enough to keep her fed for days. So that's it then, Davis said. I don't suppose the siren might be behind the other bodies we found. It's possible, I said. These days you don't see as many siren deaths, and you shouldn't see any this close to Toronto. It doesn't add up. They usually stay away from urban areas, and most of their communities have rules against killing these days. It's easier to stay hidden without bodies piling up. It still happens from time to time. Victims tend to get addicted to them. They keep seeking the siren out. She actually takes too much blood, too fast, and hides the body. Well, as of tonight, we're at 11 victims in the past 3 weeks, so obviously something isn't right, Davis said. 11? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Just like this? That we know about. I can send you the reports. Same bite marks, same lack of blood, the whole shebang, Davis replied. Why wasn't the FRB contacted sooner? He shrugged. Most of them were nobodies, bums downtown and all that jazz. A few were found in the water. We had no way to confirm anything strange was afoot, at least until now. Christ, I rubbed my temples. This wasn't good. That's just in the GTA, right? What about outside? Northern Ontario, Quebec, maybe around the border? I can check, Davis said. What exactly are you looking for? I want to know where she's hunting, I replied. Then maybe we can figure out where she's coming from. There aren't any active siren communities anywhere near the GTA, so she's got to be astray. I watched as Davis scribbled some notes down in his pad. Get that information to me as soon as you can. In the meantime, I'm going to reach out to her old friend, see if she might know something. A friend? Davis asked. Somewhat. She might know a thing or two about any other sirens in the area. Maybe she'll have an idea as to whom we're looking for. Davis gave a nod before closing his notepad. Alright then, I'll let you know what I can dig up. I'll leave you to finish up here. I nodded in return before taking out my camera to document the scene. When Della and I left the Swanson house, we didn't head back to our apartment. The night was young and it was an ideal time for a long drive. I could sense Della's unease as she sat beside me. She didn't need to say what was on her mind for me to know what was bothering her. "It's okay to be upset, you know," I said. "It doesn't get easier no matter how long you live."
I don't know if I should be comforted by that or not,
she murmured.
The smell was what bothered me the most.
I could smell them starting to...
Jesus.
I offered her a comforting hand and she quickly took it.
I get killing a wife to cover the tracks for the kids. Who what does that? I thought you told me Sally's weren't that much different from us.
Most aren't, I replied. 11 victims though, probably more. Think about it. You and I can feed without killing a person. Sirens can do the same. Why leave that big of a trail? Della grimaced. She didn't answer, but she knew what I was getting at. Our killer wasn't looking for food. She was killing for fun. Heaven Sound was almost a 4-hour drive away, but it was more than worth it. Della and I spent some of the evening in an inexpensive motel in town before I went out looking for my contact. I knew she wasn't going to be happy to see me, but the only other siren I knew wasn't exactly a local. I needed someone who was. Shelby looked like an attractive girl in her mid-20s with short red curls and green eyes that seemed to shimmer like sunlight on the surface of a lake. She favoured cut-off shorts and loose-fitting tops that showed off her body and barely hid the gills on her side. At a glance, it wouldn't have been hard not to admire her, and that was probably exactly what she wanted. Della and I just so happened to run into her at the local drugstore. She'd been in one of the aisles when she spotted us, and the moment she saw us, she knew it wasn't an accident. I could see her brow furrow slightly, and the ever so slight tense of her muscles. She watched me closely as I approached her, holding her ground as if she expected a fight. "Well, well, Robert Marsh," she said as I drew nearer. "Look, if you hear about the cat food incident, it's been 30 years. Just let it go." "Cat food incident?" Stella asked. I ignored her. "It's nice to see you too, Shelby. You look nice. How's domestic life treating you?" Her lip curled upwards in an irritated smile, exposing some of her jagged teeth. "Peaceful and quiet," she replied after a moment's hesitation. "I know this isn't a social call. What do you want?" "Why don't we talk about that in private?" I asked. She scoffed. "You ambush me at the drugstore and then ask if we can talk in private? Seriously? I knew you wouldn't answer the door if I came to your house, so you followed me," she asked, then raised an eyebrow at Della. "Who's the broad? And why didn't she try to talk some sense into you?" "This is Della. She's a close friend," I said. "Is she now? And here I always thought you were gay. I'm in a hurry, so talk fast." She picked a bottle of aspirin off the shelf and dropped it into a basket she had slung over one arm before continuing down the aisle. I followed her. "I was hoping you might be able to help me find another siren." "What? I'm not good enough for you?" she asked. "A specific siren. She's left a hell of a trail of bodies." "Well, it's not me. I get my blood from tinder, and I don't leave bodies." Shelby rounded a corner and headed into another aisle, where she stopped to look through the selection of tea. "I figured it wasn't. I'm looking for a stray, the kind that kills for fun." She paused. I saw a flicker in her eyes. "I've got 11 bodies in the GTA over the past 3 weeks, and I'm positive there's more than that haven't been found yet." "Of course there's more," she said quietly before sighing. "Anybody got a good look at her?" "There might be one witness, but they're MIA, I said. "I don't suppose there's anyone you can think of from the community at Silver Lake before everyone died? You don't need to tiptoe around it. I got my closure. I've moved on," Shelby said. "What kind of tea is best for headaches? I can't tell the difference." "Ginger root or peppermint," I said. She took one box of each. "Any sister who's at Silver Lake is either dead or fled further north," she said thoughtfully. "I doubt you'd have any luck asking around here, though." I do remember that there was an incident about a year ago before everything went tits up though. A couple of sisters had gotten bold and they were luring play into the community. I'm pretty sure Kayla was the one in charge. You remember her, right? The one with that stupid cowboy hat? Anyway, turns out that some of the prey they lured was a little too young and she was always way too kill happy. They pushed the envelope a little too far, too many times, and got kicked out for their trouble. Too little too late if you ask me. It was probably their little stunt that led to the community getting discovered and wiped out. Do you know where they went afterwards? I asked. Shelby shrugged. I can't say. I might have heard something about another sister in the area though. Paused to think for a moment. Yeah, some of the students down at the university were having a party, and I usually stop by since it's easy pickings. I saw this one guy at the bar who was drunk off his ass and talking about a girl he'd fucked who'd bitten him. I guess it kind of sounded like Kayla. It definitely wasn't me. I don't exactly follow through with my prey. My sexual preference is dinner, so I tend to eat and run. But other than that, I haven't seen any signs of another sister in the area.
You didn't happen to catch his name, did you?
Stella asked hopefully. The bartender called him Derek, I think. I haven't seen him around since. Stella went for the phone to message David. Is there anything else you might know? I asked. Anything at all? Hate to say it, but that's all I've got, Shelby said with a shrug. Kayla's gang are the only strays in the area I know about, although most of them ditched us shortly after they got kicked out. One of them got killed for hunting in our territory, and I heard another found a home south of the border. As for Kayla and her third friend, they dropped off the face of the earth. Could be you're after two sisters. Either way, watch your ass, especially if it is Kayla. Noted, I murmured.
David says that Derek Jackson's body was found in the Mississauga last week. Drained of blood, just like the others,
Stella said, looking up at me and Shelby.
If Kayla was the one who attacked him.
She didn't want to finish the job, Shelby said. She pursed her lips before she sighed. Fuck me. Regardless of whether or not it is her, you two are going to have a hell of a time against the sister. Are you offering to help? I asked. Offering? She scoffed. That's funny. You're not going to take out a sister without another sister on your side. And as much and as I don't really feel all warm and fuzzy about changing you to get killed, even if you are a whiny prick.
We took down a ghoul a few weeks ago,
Stella said. It can't be that much harder, can it? My 1200-year-old mother could pop a ghoul's skull and she's been dead for 50 years, she replied. Look, I've got to take care of something first, make some arrangements and all that. But I could be ready to go in an hour, maybe two. We can wait, I replied. No shit, Count Bagula. 1 hour. I'll meet you back at my place. It'll be just like old times. She clapped me on the shoulder before turning to leave us. As soon as she was gone, Stella looked over at me.
So,
she said,
how exactly do you two know each other?
It's complicated, I replied. I'll tell you later. Right now, I think I need a drink. Truthful words, we met up with Shelby about an hour later. She carried a small backpack with her and stood waiting by the front porch of a small but quaint suburban house. I thought I could see someone watching from the upstairs windows, but I didn't get a good look at them. Everything taken care of? I asked, as Shelby got into my back seat. It's fine. Let's just get this over with, she replied as I took off. I have to say, I never expected any of you, of all people, to end up going domestic. I would have figured you'd have gone up north with the others. There's no food up north, Shelby replied. Heaven sounds small, but it's got a steady rotating supply of fresh blood, and I'm sure that's the only reason you stayed, I teased. Through the rearview mirror, I could catch her glaring at me. I have a good friend in town. We have an arrangement. I reached out to a friend of mine. It's a cottage a few hours from here, owned by a Kate Silver.
I thought it might be a good place to look.
Kate say that?
Stella asked. Kate was one of the sisters who was kicked out with Kayla, and she's the only one who isn't accounted for. A lot of sisters use the name of their community as a surname. Kate was always a kind of yes man. If I have to take a guess, I'd say she's still with Kayla. It's a good place to start, I said. So what's the address? 415 King's Trail. It's a little bit past Sudbury, but it's right on the water and out of our territory. Not a bad place to hide if you ask me.
Isn't that a little far from Toronto?
Stella asked. It is, but even if Kate isn't involved, she might lead us to Kayla, I replied. We might as well talk to her. Stella put the address into her phone and I looked back at Shelby. She was already looking at her phone and tapping away at it. You sure you're okay leaving your friend alone? I wouldn't be here if I didn't know she'd be alright, she replied. Trust me, she can take care of herself. Just keep your eyes on the road and your head out of your ass and everything will turn out fine. I nodded and looked ahead at the road. It was around 1 in the afternoon when we made it to the cottage. The sky was overcast and the air had a winter chill to it. The roads were nearly empty. Next to nobody was up in cottage country at that time of year. It was a lonely place that would have been a perfect place to hide. King's Trail ran adjacent to a lake and a wispy mist hovered over the surface of the water.
We got a new email from Davis,
Stella said as we drove along the narrow road.
Looks like our number of victims has gone up by about 37. Almost all of them were found in water. Most of them were killed during the past month.
Where exactly were they found? I asked.
All over the place. French River, Parry Sound, Gravenhurst, Barry.
They're between Sudbury and Toronto, Shelby said. I guess she commutes. I spotted a sign for 415 and turned down the driveway. It's also places hurt in this area, I said. The cottage ahead of us looked run down. Its wood panelling looked as if it had been peeling off the exterior and had outright fallen off in some places. It looked abandoned, but I spotted a blue Ford truck parked in the driveway. Somebody was clearly home. I parked my sedan behind it before getting out.
Why travel such a long distance though?
Stella asked as she got out. Supply, probably, Shelby replied. I'd imagine you'd need to feed every few days, don't you? She asked.
Yeah, just about,
Stella said. Well, it's the same for us. Now, if you're not killing your prey, you can let them rest and come back to them when they've had time to recover. If you're smart, you can get yourself a bunch of dumbass frat boys who think with their dicks and sort of just farm them. It's still a fair hunt, but you're not depleting your supply. Start killing them on the other hand though, it makes the hunt that much harder, I finished as I approached the cottage. The lights inside were out. I couldn't smell anyone inside though, although there was a faint stink of decay in the air that made me uneasy. I tried the door. It was locked. Let me have a look at that, Shelby said before she pushed past me. She tried the door as well before violently throwing her weight against it. Past the door as it swung open.
Jesus!
I heard Stella murmur under her breath as Shelby gestured for us to go inside. The interior of the cottage looked empty. There had once been furniture inside, but now it looked as if it had been removed. The place seemed abandoned, save for the smell. Something died in here, I noted as I walked into the cottage kitchen. Oh, really? Did your enhanced fucking senses pick that up? Shelby asked. Christ, what was she storing bodies in here? What the hell? She covered her mouth and nose before entering the house after me. The stink of death was overpowering. I doubted that Shelby could have found its source, but I could. I wandered from the kitchen and into the hallway. The smell was coming from the bathroom, and I braced myself for what I'd find in there as I pushed the door open. The bathtub was filled with water, and I could see the corpse of a woman floating inside. She'd been dead for some time, that much was clear. Her hands and feet were both bound with thick rope. It looked as if she'd been left to drown. I covered my mouth with my sleeve at the sight of her and made myself step forward. My eyes immediately went to her neck. looking for signs that she'd been bitten, but I saw nothing. Instead, through her partially open mouth, I glimpsed the jagged teeth of a siren.
What is it?
Stella called behind me. She'd stayed outside by the front door. We've got another body here, I called, and I could hear Shelby coming up behind me. She paused in the doorway as she saw the body, her eyes widening.
Shit!
She murmured before hurrying to the side of the tub.
It's Kate!
What happened to her? I asked, and watched as Shelby reached into the water. She lifted up Kate's shirt, exposing her gills before grimacing in disgust.
Someone stuffed her gills,
she said quietly. Excuse me? I said. They drowned her, Shelby said. Put something in her gills so she couldn't breathe. Look at this. Slowly she reached into one of the gills and pulled out something round and dark red. I couldn't tell what it was at first.
Cotton balls. Fucking cotton balls. Fuck me.
You think Kayla did this? I asked.
Who the fuck else would have done it?
Shelby snapped. She looked down at the body again before forcing herself to exhale and shake her head.
This is sick. She's fucking tortured her. Hell, she didn't even have the common fucking decency to bury her. She could be in the lake, buried, not left up here to stink and rot.
She stopped herself before going further and tried to force herself to be composed.
I'll need to make sure she's properly buried before we leave. If you need pictures, evidence, whatever, just do it now.
I managed a half nod before taking out my camera. I made it quick. With the body documented, I left the cottage so Shelby could do what she needed to. Stella was standing down by the floating dock, looking out over the misty lake. She looked back at me as I came down to join her.
Is everything alright?
Yeah, I replied, feeling tired. I smoothed down my hair as I looked out over the lake. The body belonged to Kate. Shelby's asked to bury it. I think this just confirms that it was Kayla we're after.
That's good, isn't it?
Stella asked. I gave a half nod. Yeah, the FRB will put out an alert on her. She'll turn up soon enough.
You don't sound too happy about that.
She noted. I'm fine with it. It's just... I paused. She tortured one of her own. A friend, from the sounds of it. Who does something like that? Who murders one of their own just because?
People do it all the time.
Stella said.
I've killed people before.
Not for the hell of it, you didn't. I rubbed my temple before sighing. We'll look through the cottage after Shelby's done. See if we can't find any hint as to where Kayla went. I felt Stella reach for my hand and let her lace her fingers with mine. For a moment, we just stood there together in silence. In my pocket, I felt my phone buzz and shifted away from her so I could answer it. The number on the display belonged to Davis. Davis? I said as I answered. Good to hear from you. How's it going, Marsh? He replied. I think she'd be happy to hear the neighbours just brought this little May Swanson about an hour ago. She said. I let out a breath that I didn't know I'd been holding. Perfect. I think I've got an ID on our killer. I'll give you a full update when we meet up later. How's the kid doing? Good, but unharmed, Davis said. Seems like she got a good look at the killer, but I'm having trouble getting any detail out of her, aside from the fact that she drove a blue truck. A blue truck. My eyes shifted over to the blue Ford that was parked by the cottage. I'd assumed that it was Kate, although if it'd been sitting there for as long as she had, she could have covered it in fallen leaves and snow. It wasn't. Excuse me? A blue truck? I asked. My guess is the kid bolted and hid as soon as her parents got attacked. She must have seen the killer driving off. I traded a look with Della. She was looking at the truck too. Now, if that was Kayla's truck, then she'd been at the cottage recently. Or she was still there. Where would a siren at the lakeside cottage hide? Della's head shifted to the side, looking over at some movement, although she had no time to react before the dock was thrown upwards. Something burst out of the water beside it, and as it did, the dock was violently upturned. Stella was tossed into the water, and as the spray fell, I saw the figure of a woman standing in the lake, her eyes fixated on me, Kayla. It had been years since I'd seen her, but I recognised her all the same. Her long brown hair clung to her face, and that cocky look in her eyes was impossible to forget. I dropped my phone and went for the pistol in my belt. But by the time I drew it, Kayla had already closed the distance between us. She grabbed the gun in my hand and violently ripped it from my grasp. Her other hand gripped me by the throat, and with the same effort one might use to dispatch a child, she slammed me against the ground.
Well, Robert Marsh, wasn't it? Croydie hissed. It's been a long time, hasn't it, handsome?
She pressed my gun against my forehead, a knowing smile on her lips.
Credit where it's due. I wasn't expecting someone like you to pop in before I was done cleaning up. But hey, shit happens, right?
Tossed the wet hair out of her eyes.
Well, let's just call it a happy little accident, shall we? What was that you were just saying on the phone? That kid finally turned up? Good news, right? I was kind of hoping she'd freeze to death, but hey, at least I know for sure, and that's what matters. I appreciate the helping hands.
I saw her finger tighten on the trigger, and I looked her dead in the eye. If she was going to shoot me, I at least didn't want her to give her the satisfaction of making me cower. I don't think it mattered to her either way. All I saw was a cold, sadistic anticipation.
Kayla!
At the sound of Shelby's voice, I saw a new expression cross Kayla's face. Concern. She looked over towards the cottage where Shelby stood just outside the back door. I could see a rage on her face that even made me a little nervous. Kayla, on the other hand, seemed amused by it.
Well, hey there, Shelby, she said. Did the Count here rope you into this? I thought you'd gone native. Leave the vampire alone. We know what you've done. You've gone way too far this time. You're not going to outrun it.
What?
Are you going to have a word with the elders?
Kayla scoffed.
Please. I know what happened to Silver Lake. There's nothing left. The elders are dead, as are our sisters. It's only you and me now. The last two sisters of Silver Lake. You lost your right to be called sister when you were exiled,
Shelby snarled.
Did I? Well then, I suppose there goes an incentive I might have had not to kill you too.
Kayla moved to aim the gun at Shelby, and in doing so, I saw my window and took it. I grabbed at her arm and forced it towards my mouth. She may have been physically stronger than me, but she still bled when bit. Her warm blood filled my mouth as I sank my teeth into her arm, and for just a moment, her grip on the gun loosened. She jerked backwards, and I managed to kick her off me. The gun fell from her grasp, and I grabbed at it. From the corner of my eye, I saw Kayla's eyes dart between myself and Shelby, who'd taken off towards her at a sprint. The woman wasn't a fool. She knew she was outnumbered, and as I tried to aim my gun at her, Kayla kicked me in the jaw before taking off towards her truck. She only barely made it there before Shelby reached her and slammed her into the grill of the Ford, pinning her against it.
You lured the prey to Silver Lake,
Shelby snarled.
You were the one who doomed it. Their blood is on your hands.
Kayla gritted her teeth and drove her fist into Shelby's neck. I heard her gag as she struggled to breathe. With a cry of exertion, Shelby was hurled to the ground as Kayla scrambled to the cabin of her truck. By the time Shelby was on her feet again, the engine had roared to life. The truck shot forward, throwing Shelby up on the hood, where she rolled off and hit the ground in a heap. I forced myself up to my feet and took aim at the windshield. I only got off 2 shots before the truck hit me and sent me back to the ground. My ears were ringing, but I could see Kayla's truck backing out into the road. A moment later, she was gone, leaving only the sound of squealing rubber in her wake. I could see Shelby starting to pick herself up, wincing in pain as she did. From the corner of my eye, I watched Della crawling out of the lake. She rushed to my side as I made myself stand. "She's going after the Swanson's kid," I rasped. "We've got to warn Davis." I spotted my phone on the ground nearby and gestured to it. Della picked it up. She handed it to me and I dialed the number. Shelby stared bitterly in the direction Kayla had driven off in. She was ahead of us, but we weren't out of the fight yet. Part of me had hoped that we'd catch up to Kayla on the road, but we didn't see a single trace of her. I wondered if perhaps she only suggested that she was going after the child to throw us off, send us back to Toronto so she could go elsewhere. I wasn't going to bet on that though. It was past sunset by the time we made it back to Toronto. We didn't bother heading to Davis's office. We knew he wouldn't be there, and neither would May Swanson. Rick Davis was many things, but naive, he wasn't. Instead, we headed towards the city's west end, Etobicoke. It had been some time since I'd needed to visit Davis's apartment there. It wasn't his home. I'd never actually been to his home before, but I'd been to the apartment. He and a few of his associates had used it before as a safe house. If there were any place he'd take May Swanson, it would be there. The apartment was in a more suburban part of town, in a duplex on a quiet and unassuming street. I parked the sedan out front and got out. My body was still a little sore from being run over by a mermaid serial killer earlier, but I knew I could manage. "Doesn't look like Kayla found him," Stella noted as we got out and went to the front door. I paused as soon as I noticed that it was open just a crack. Immediately I went for my gun and pushed my way inside. The apartment was dark, but I could smell fresh blood. In the dim light I could see a man lying against the wall. Alive, but wounded. Davis. I swore under my breath and rushed to his side and heard him groan in pain. I could see the gash in his neck. He was losing blood fast. I put some pressure on his wound, trying to stop the bleeding if I could. "Bosh!" he rasped. "The kid! He's here!" I called to the others. "He's got the kid!" I could hear Della behind me. Her hand was placed in my own to put pressure on Davis's wound. Outside, I could hear the roar of an engine. We just missed her. I took off like a shot, rushing past Shelby, through the door and back out onto the street. I could see the tail lights of the truck just down the street and I took aim. It was reckless, but I had no other choice. I squeezed off 3 shots before I heard the pop of Kayla's rear tires. The truck swerved and jerked, swinging into another parked car. The Ford all but crushed it. I kept my gun raised as I approached the crash. I saw one of the truck's doors swing open. The small shape of a child dropped out onto the street and desperately tried to run. The driver's side door opened and I watched as Kayla stepped out. She straightened the rancher's hat on her head before fixing me in a frustrating glare. "Terrible timing, Marsh," she hissed. "Absolutely fucking terrible. You're not getting the kid, Kayla," I said. "It's over." "Oh, it's over," says the pretty little vampire cop, she scoffed. "You think I'm going to throw in the towel just because you tell me? I've been an apex fucking predator for longer than you've been alive, vampire. It's in my blood, my very nature. There's no changing it. I am what I am, and what I am, sweetheart, is fucking hungry." She took a step towards me, but I wasn't going to let her close the distance this time. I pulled the trigger. The bullet struck her in the shoulder, but it didn't stop her. She threw herself at me, and not a single bullet I fired was enough to slow her down. Then from the corner of my eye I saw movement. Something grabbed her and yanked her to the side, forcing her to the ground. In the streetlight I saw Shelby standing over Kayla, keeping her pinned. "Sorry, cowgirl, but the bullshit stops now," she snarled before breaking her nose. Her hand closed around Kayla's throat, ready to choke the life out of her. I put a hand on Shelby's shoulder. I kept my gun trained on Kayla. "Don't," I warned her. "Why? You know she deserves it. We should stuff her gills, drown her like she drowned Kate." "Not right here, Shelby." She opened her mouth to protest before she saw exactly what I meant. The gunshots and commotion hadn't gone unnoticed. People had come out of their houses. Countless eyes were upon us. This wasn't the place to put a mad dog down, even if she had it coming. I saw Shelby's grip on Kayla's neck loosen. I kept my gun trained on her head, but she was out cold. She stayed that way until the distant police sirens made it to us. Detective Davis was lucky, as was May Swanson. Both came out that night alive. I suppose Kayla was lucky that she did too. It wasn't easy to keep Shelby from finishing the job behind closed doors, but I managed to convince her to settle for detention. It was a small comfort to see Kayla shipped off somewhere where I doubted she'd ever see the light of day again. Personally, I wouldn't have minded seeing her put down, but I don't make those rules. All I do is enforce them as best as I can. When Della and I parted ways with Shelby back in Heaven Sound the next day, I honestly was hoping I'd see her again, and maybe I will, only under better circumstances. Maybe next time I can see what kind of life she's carved out for herself. Maybe someday I can have one of my own.
Don't forget, if you enjoyed listening to the story, be sure to pop over to the author's Reddit profile and drop them a line. I'm sure they'd appreciate it. The link to their Reddit profile will be below in the description. Don't forget to check out the merch store. The link will be in the description and also in the video thumbnail. If you'd like an honourable mention, send in a snapshot of yourself to be purchased and I'll feature it in one of the videos. And have you written a creepypasta story you would like me to narrate? Have you had any cryptid sightings, paranormal or supernatural encounters? Or have you even had a creepy or terrifying situation you would like to share? You can submit your stories and encounters and any other mail to cryptidsroost@gmail.com. If you wish to remain anonymous, that's fine with me. I also have a Facebook group, Twitter, Reddit, and you'll also find me on Discord. If you would like to support the channel and help make it grow, any and all donations can be made to paypal.me/cryptidsroost and would be most gratefully received. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.